More than 20 years have passed since my cousin Chris died. And I'm still obsessed by his story. I want to understand why Chris, a young Swiss man who grew up in a peaceful country, joined a faraway war and ended up dead.
The film is a film about my cousin who in the 90s came to Yugoslavia. It was then still Yugoslavia. He was a young journalist in the beginning of his career, and he came here as freelance journalist to report from the front line. After a while he joined an international mercenary group, became a soldier there, and then he got killed like a few weeks later. It was never solved. It was never clear who did it, who killed my cousin, what really happened to him. At that time I was 10 years old. For me it was like really impressive situation, impressive thing, what happened to my big cousin. For me he was like always the big cousin. He was much older than me. I was looking up to him. He was traveling a lot, so he was kind of a, let's say, projection surface for my childish hero stories.
Well, we found the story quite interesting about a young guy who goes to war and as a journalist and ends up actually being part of the war in terms of being a mercenary. So that one was already quite interesting as such, and the fact that Anja is actually related to him makes it even more interesting. And of course there was the animation, and we've seen the short movie done by Anja Krigi, and it is really fascinating how she portrayed his story with this black and white animation where everything smoothly goes into the next picture, which is really great to look at. And we were curious to see what we can do on a bigger scale.
I decided to combine animation and live action because of the story itself, of the subject. Because in the story there is so many things which are not clear. It is a story that deals with war, and war is very subjective, very emotional. And animation is a great tool. You can try to find metaphoric images, symbolic images. On the other hand, you have the documentary part, which I've chosen to keep it because if I talk to you, for example, I see your face, you have like different information within the expression, the facial expression, and you tell me something in words, but your face might tell me something different. Especially in a topic like this, where it's very difficult to find the truth, to come to the truth. I would have lost it if it was only animation.
Second nationality were French, third one were Germans, and after that we had a bit of everything.
Didn't we have a Swiss guy? No.
No. That's, yeah.
Yes, one.
Yeah, he died in Osijek. That's why the lady is here.
Ah.
This film is a Swiss-Croatian-German co-production. The whole animation production is happening in Croatia, in this animation studio in Zagreb. At the beginning there was nothing here, there was no animation studio in Croatia. We set up everything from the scratch. There are 35 people working here, coming from Switzerland, France, Italy, Spain, and of course Croatia.
For the animation, when we started with it, there was Anja's short film as a reference, and he has a lot of abstract animation in it. It was painted on paper, and the idea was that we get as much of that into the movie, but in a way that it was possible to do with a big team. We tried to reproduce this style of painting on paper digitally, and we did that by making brush strokes on paper like real, and then scan them and making brushes that exactly reproduce those brush strokes.
When you look at a painting with black ink, if you go a bit close, you see that there is some blue, some brown, some red, some yellow inside, because the reaction of the ink with the paper is giving this kind of color. So we also did the movie in the same way, that we put some brown, some yellow, red, blue, etc. If it's just black and white, it's really cold. with these different kind of colors. We can have some depth, but it's not real color. When you see it on the screen, it's black and white.
Now the characters should have some resemblance to the real characters, but it was not the most important. We also tried to exaggerate some characteristics of them, but also to keep a graphic style in the design, to not go into something realistic, and also to stay to something that fits at least a bit to the style of Anja's way of drawing.
But you can call me Chico, like my friends.
Chris Württemberg.
The Swiss, I know. I saw your passport, remember?
The function of a background is a stage for the animation. So the single things we see should not jump into the eye. We must create a unity in such a background, and the center of action is underlined or more visible than the rest. We rarely push the brush, we print. We print a color with different textures so that we get a look like watercolor ink sketch painting. It's a technique, needs a lot of concentration to make the right choice for the right brush and the right color intensity. It needs a while to get into the style because it's against the usual behavior how to paint. Sometimes it's nerve-wracking because when you change something, it means a lot of change in consequence. It's not only that you can change one thing easily.
On a daily basis, we have to decide which things we could be computer generated, or which things have to be done by effects department or animation department. It means that we could create some snow falling, some rain, sometimes some mist. Especially the effects for the soldiers' insects have to be done by effects department because it was impossible to do this computer generated without noticing.
There was this noise, this terrible noise. There was this noise, this terrible noise.
I was looking for a voice which kind of has this tension inside, which is not smooth, which is not proper, which is a bit, an interesting voice, where you can feel that this person went through a lot of things already. And when I heard Joel, I thought it's a good voice. He's not very close to Chris, but still he has something which fits very well. And he's a good actor, which helps.
Well, more or less, I can say he's a big mystery. More for me, I think, than maybe for Anja, that knew him at least as a kid and has some memories of how he moves, how he is, how he talks. And that's also why I think it's animated and not acted as a movie, because there is so much unsureness about him. What makes it very, very interesting for me.
Seltsame Gestalten bleiben sitzen.
The work on this film, the editing is quite special because it took so long time. I was now at least three and a half years on and off on this project. The combination of documentary and animation is actually quite insane because it's a completely different process how you get along. So it's an opposite approach to it. I was involved already in the storyboard. We really edited the storyboards, and it was interesting for me to be part of the development of the animation scenes too.
Visually, I think as well, it's important to always hear the dialogue, and like how I as well work, it's always I hear the story and like what they say exactly, and and what's in the picture important now to see and to focus there and to give the cold or the warm feeling in that moment.
The sound design for Chris the Swiss is a little bit demanding sound design, a little bit more demanding than for other documentaries, because there's a good part of the film animated, and the animations are not showing realistic scenes. They also do sometimes, but most of the times they are a little bit surrealistic. So the demands on the sound design are to find metaphoric sounds, to find not realistic sounds, to be adequate to the picture. And also we have developed the idea that we want to show the contrast that we have also in the picture, because we are using different types of material besides the animation that are really cineastic. So we have different aesthetics, and we decided to emphasize in the sound also the difference between these aesthetics. At the same time, we want to use the sound in a way that we are gluing things together. So we have to make contrasts big enough, but also transitions smooth enough. I think this is not a very easy process. It needs a lot of experimenting. Because of this, we decided from the very beginning to discuss the matters also with the composer. So we have a close collaboration between the musician, the director, and the sound designer. From the point of view of mixing the film, we are also planning on a concept to keep documentary parts small, like in the cinema, more from the center, from the screen, more out of the screen, and the animated parts we will try to spread in the space using the surrounds to really emphasize also the aesthetic difference between the animated parts and the real film parts.
Very important thing is always, I think, whatever, it doesn't matter which movie I'm working with, it's the texture. And with this Chris the Swiss, if we think about the world, this animation world where Chris is going and moving around, and we think about those locations, I think that the kind of feel of dirty and also rough, not very beautiful things, they have been texture I have tried to keep on my mind with every sound I've been doing. I definitely think that Foley is a big part of the storytelling, and we are doing the storytelling through sound, and if director can say what kind of feeling he or she is looking for, then it's my job to kind of make it. That's always something I'm expecting to hear from directors, the feelings and the, let's say, colors of sound.
For a composer and a musician, it's great to have such a film, to be like a child there, to explore every kind of music, every kind of stuff with synthesizers and all these different kind of instrumentation. And that was one of my my biggest challenge till now as a musician. As a matter of fact, I had to start from zero again of what I have learned yet, in a way. There were two things I had to think about, I had to plan with. It's the water. I was talking to Anja, she told me about her nightmare she had all the time as a girl already, like dreaming about water, falling down into water, a lot of ice and rain in the dreams. So we wanted to put a water sound, a kind of water music, into the score as well. And the insects, like in the animated parts are the insects, which are showing a little bit the transformation from Chris to a madman actually. Then to have a more human sound was the idea to have a core, like that was Anja saw always somebody singing in there. And I work with the sound designer, like with Markus, since a month already. So it was very important that I knew what he's doing. So it was a very close working process with all the sound departments.
I have the impression that now this film is much more actual than it was when I started it. Because when I started it, it was like, yeah, who cares about that story? Who cares about Croatia? Who cares about some journalist who got killed like 20 years ago? But now when you look to the world or to Europe, I mean, this tendency of right-wing and also this tendency of young men going into war as mercenaries, I mean, all of a sudden it's very actual. I was obsessed of trying to find my cousin's murderer. It was my motivation in the beginning, but all of a sudden through the researches I just realized it's not important. I mean, it will not bring him back. They cannot be brought to court anymore, so it will not change anything at all. But what was more fascinating for me was like the whole energy behind, yeah, the interest behind, and also this completely different reality to mine, and this fascination for another reality, which I think really swallowed my cousin in the end.